Hey everyone, Drew here, and today I have a new database tier list for you based on 100 top teams from around the world. As usual, there's quite a few changes this time, but first let's take a look at some of the new units. Starting off with Bride Lancelot, and she is going to SS Tier. As I already said in my review of her when she came out, it is really hard to go wrong with a 100% guard, and this one is no exception. Her stun skin on every second hit that is not ignorable is just really nice, and also of course the kind of stun purify mechanic, her bridal swift slash, which is a really strong upgrade to a desperate drain, and the battle trance mechanic, keeping her alive for longer and giving her the opportunity to come back if she gets a kill. Granted, sometimes it is a bit rough watching her trying to get that kill because she has such a strong skill unlocked with it, but her damage is low of course as a guard, and her targeting is very questionable because she really tries to go for the big HP units sometimes instead of just getting that kill. For her to reliably get to that battle trance state, she of course needs a full awakening. She is really a guard that absolutely needs that. At one copy, you would probably prefer someone like Light Ludmilla even over Bride Lancelot. And of course there's this big weakness against Super Poison and Mega Poison that is her absolute bane and prevents her from going into that battle trance. But as long as we don't see more Super Poison and Mega Poison units come out, I think she is doing quite okay. And another thing that is possibly holding her back from reaching the SSS tier is of course that she doesn't work with burn units. Except someone like Nobunaga of course. We have King Arthur up next, and that is a unit of course a lot of people were quite excited about. She's the first one that actually has a kind of mechanic that allows her to ignore certain mechanics that usually keep other units alive. Besides that skill, she has an extremely strong poison and blood skill set, especially at dawn, with huge damage boosts and quicken and armor. But that kind of King's Dawn of course comes with some drawbacks. That is, if she is not in your starting lineup in Arena, or if she's pushed back or banished, then all that kind of good stuff goes away forever, and then she's really mid, I would say. And of course, she is somewhat vulnerable to stun and sleep. For now, she is going to the SS tier, not quite making it to the very top, but I still see potential there. However, thinking about it long term, I'm not really a fan of her chances because of that dawn mechanic, because as soon as she's not really fitting in well into that kind of first platoon anymore and is being pushed away by some stronger releases, then her view becomes really bleak, I think. Similar to what we saw 2 years ago with Dark Snow White. Dark Snow White, who was a number 1 before Dark Jeanne was released, is now rated in the D tier, by the way. As for Storm Clarice and Angel Jeanne, as I mentioned in my reviews, I think they are very good and can absolutely shine in certain compositions. Especially Storm Clarice can become an unstoppable avalanche for an enemy team, but there is not yet enough data to rate them both reliably, so they will be tiered in the next edition. Now looking towards the tier changes, we have a few units dropping to the graveyard tier, and that is Orzakron, this kind of stun entry unit that is still sometimes useful at one copy, but really not used in top teams anymore, of course. And then we have Clarice, this sleep unit, which really does not hold up well against this kind of newer sleep units that do a lot more things much better and cheaper than her. I mean, for example, she still has that kind of sleep 2 skill that can't be applied to units that have already slept and that costs 5 spirit. And then we also see Fire Astrid drop. This kind of burn unit at least can take solace in the fact that her commander version is still the very best burn unit in the game and still probably staying in the top 10 for quite a bit. Looking at the F tier next, we see Light Jeanne, the very first original Jeanne with that kind of Michelle mechanic. When she came out, she was super strong, but unfortunately also very much outdated now. In contrast, we also see another light unit fall down, and it is Light Misha. That is a unit I think that never really hit the top 20. There are some good things about her skill set, but main problem of her, of course, always was that she might actually end up helping the enemy team with her kind of Wigger launch, a pushback mechanic. Most notably, always a big problem against someone like Bright Ludmilla back when she was released. And we see also another light unit join the F tier, and that is Saya. And also together with someone from the D tier even, and that is Hibiki. Both of them, of course, released together in an event nearly 3 years ago. So, I mean, it has been quite a while. Both couldn't really benefit all that much from the burn resurgence this year because their skill sets are just that tiny bit too outdated. Especially Hibiki, of course, because with her crisis skill set, this is just not really jiving well with today's meta. But yeah, Hibiki was previously a top 3 unit, probably when 2.0 came out. We do have some positive news as well, and that is for Earth Ludmilla, surprisingly, who manages to get out of the F tier and rises up to the E tier with that kind of give turn plus and support skill set. She can still be used in some teams, although I would not overvalue this tier rating too much. As I always say, everything below B tier is a really hard sell for me to recommend to pull, except for fellowships and possibly as a filler, of course. The same is true for a unit that drops from D to E tier. Dark Ossia doesn't really manage to benefit from this King Arthur release that we saw. King Arthur really a kind of self-sustaining poison blood unit, and Dark Ossia, even though she both has that kind of blood and poison skill set, isn't really picked up or used more often because of King Arthur, as we can see. Who does get more usage, surprisingly, is Earthray, who is up to D tier. Granted, only 5 out of 100 top teams are using her, but still this is a clear rise over last month. She is one of the last units that was released that doesn't really have any self-healing capabilities, but it's still interesting to use her with more and more units having very good entry effects. Someone who doesn't really have strong entry effects but benefited briefly from the Commander Astrid release is Fire Mirai, but now going down to the D tier because there's just much better burn units available, especially after that kind of Nobunaga and Honoji double release. A Pseudo Guard is going down in Storm Ossia, also going to the D tier. Her Flipstun random mechanic is of course nice together with her Hold Ground Plus, even at 1 copy. However, we do see units coming out now that are actually able to even ignore that kind of Hold Ground Plus, which kept her relevant for quite a long time. Looking up to C tier, we do see some changes here, and that first one is Mizuchi joining. Her kind of counter skin mechanic together with the Time Train Plus was absolutely amazing when it was released nearly 2 years ago. However, at this point, I think it's fair to say that counter mechanics have kind of fallen out of the meta because so many things ignore it. And I wasn't really joking earlier when I said that poison units really didn't benefit all that much from the King Arthur release, because surprisingly we not only see Dark Rainer with that kind of mega poison entry and doppelganger mechanic join the C tier, but also Angel Reset, who is going down from A to C tier. This is something that surprised me a lot when I saw this in the data, but it is what it is. Only 14% usage for Angel Reset despite the release of a Bride Lancelot. I have seen her pop off greatly in some certain scenarios. However, that kind of hardcore RNG dependence is of course something that is holding her back. And given kind of this kind of endless backstory, I really would have liked to see more, or rather a stronger revival mechanic on her skill set. Come to think of it, something like Michaela's Rescue, where she's pushed back to the reinforcements whenever she dies under certain circumstances, is something that would have fit her kind of narrative quite nicely, I think. But Angel Reset is not the only newish unit that is going down further. We also see Honoji go down from A to B tier. She's a burn unit that can pop off under certain circumstances, but is just too limited in some other cases. And I think Nobunaga turned out very much superior to her. Granted, similar to Angel Reset, I do think that tier is undervaluing her a little bit. But I mean, what can you do? She has 11% usage right now. The next unit has more than double that usage. However, she is also older and she's at 26% usage. Is Haku falling down to the B tier? This kind of support unit never really got to such a dominating position as did Light Mirai as a supporter. And now she joins exactly that unit in the B tier again. Unless we get a super strong support unit released soon, I think it is fair to say that pure support units are really not in the meta right now, given all that kind of self-sustaining support that is going on with all these newer units. The tier moves upwards are rare, but this time we have a few of them, and the next one is Light Hibiki, going from B to A tier actually, and she has Hold Ground Plus, which is always nice despite all the releases that we've seen recently. But even more importantly, she has that kind of banish skill immediately available to her, possibly messing up the enemy lineup idea, kind of. And she also has that kind of Lucky Mori mechanic, which can be a blessing or a curse, honestly, given that we have all these units that are benefiting from getting kills right now. So Mori's in the middle of your lineup, while at her release it was really nice to have that kind of extra guards coming in all the time. Now it's not quite as straightforward, but obviously a lot of people find very good use in her. That is why she is rising to the A tier. Other units are falling to the A tier, and that is 2 burn units, for example, and their names are Freya and Fire Elmina. Burn, especially pure burn, is getting pushed back more and more, and so this is not really a huge surprise. However, there is some upside potential, given that we possibly see another kind of Sleeping Beauty type character coming out. So maybe they will get a revival. That Sleeping Beauty type character will probably be an Earth unit that combines a sleep and stealth skill set, and we did see a unit before that combined those 2 traits, and that was Water Snow White. Unfortunately, no longer that much relevant, and also falling into the A tier after some heavy losses in the recent month. While she does have some really nice skills, and that was the reason why she was so good 1 year ago, a big problem for her now is the kind of survivability that she is lacking. What kept her alive usually was that kind of counter skin with an immediate self heal, but counters get ignored more and more often, plus she can be easily one-shot under the right circumstances. While recording this, I'm just recognizing a pattern here in terms of that kind of counter mechanic falling in this tier list, because guess who is also falling from SS tier to the S tier? It is Lancelot, the original Storm Lancelot, who has been released nearly 1 year ago and kind of introduced this new era of quick power creep. Granted, at S tier she is still very good and 2/3 of the top teams are still using her, but she is getting overruled by many of these new units at this point. Stealth nerfs and stun immunities are both very bad for her. Someone who could be countered quite nicely by this original Lancelot is also falling, and that is from SSS tier. Ludmilla and Clarice are going down to the SS tier. That was actually the biggest move down in terms of true power last month. And with Sleep Wards on the rise, it is not a huge surprise, although it is a bit ironic that someone like Storm Clarice is such a hard counter for Ludmilla and Clarice. That leaves only 3 units in the SSS tier because Sleeping Beauty, while rising, still not quite manages to break into the SSS tier. Light Anya still remains the very best SSR guard right now based on the data. Storm Jeanne probably the best supporter in the game in combination with the kind of Storm Michaela cycle. This revival mechanic of course especially becomes more interesting now that we see more skills that ignore certain survival mechanics on other units. So having this kind of cycle potentially going on for a while is still very, very much helpful. Additionally, from SSS tier, Storm Jeanne is clearly the very best unit to only get 1 copy of. Well, of course, it's always recommended to have full awakening for full power. She doesn't really need it all that much because her mechanic revolves around her high hate and Storm Michaela's guarding and purifying. And last but not least, while some are already saying she's dead, Cinderella still reigns supreme based on the data. She has 98% usage in top teams and most of them field her in the first 2 platoons still. And given that Sixer seems to be pushing stealth a bit more again now with the release of Angel Jeanne, but also with the prospective release of Kaguya, Cinderella is probably staying relevant for quite a while. If she gets a kill, she is safe from King Arthur's Regal Eclipse. But of course, King Arthur and Storm Clarice are strong counters against her, so let's see how she develops in the future. That's it for now. Here you have the newest data-based tier list based on 101 teams from around the world. That is Japan, Asia, rest of Asia that is, and of course Europe and the Americas. This takes me north of 10 hours to put together, so don't forget to like and subscribe to become a true carrot. I really appreciate your support. And as always, thanks for watching.